Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ dhammāṃ saṅghāṃ namasāmi. So I was expecting a nice 6 days of quiet and peace here in Chithurst, and lo and behold, a message came, can you give a talk? But how can I refuse my dear friend Ajahn Asoko? So, well, thank you. First of all, I haven't been here in a while, so I just want to say thank you for the hospitality and reception. It's an incredibly pleasant place to come to, Chithurst. I was just commenting with Ajahn Vinita how incredibly still and quiet it feels around here without the highways and airports nearby. Chithurst feels very natural and still. So it's a good place to come to and sit down, literally or figuratively. Just come and stop and watch. The Buddha's teaching of the Four Noble Truths is a very good tool to use to investigate. I'm often remembering how, like the Dalai Lama talks very often when he's addressing people, he starts off a public address by pointing out what binds us, what connects us, what levels the playing field is. We all want to be happy and escape suffering. And that's something everybody can relate to. And in saying something that simple, he opens the door to the Four Noble Truths. A lot of Lumpo Sumedo's talks, he sits down and says, this is an opportunity to notice the way it is. And somehow those two openings really bring us to the same place. So this place is this opportunity to watch what's happening right now. Notice the bodies sitting in chairs on the floor. Just noticing what it feels like. Noticing the mind, what that is up to. And then using this teaching of the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths, to start asking questions. Asking questions is a very, very useful thing to learn how to do in the practice because we're full of ideas, and most of those ideas are nonsense, so we're full of nonsense. And it doesn't really take that much integrity and honesty to actually acknowledge that. And almost every time I sit down and just pay attention to the thoughts going through the mind, I'm very happy that most people are not mind readers, because I'd be embarrassed if they were. And I think most of us are in that boat. Now, learning to pay attention to what our attitude is, what our position is here and now in relationship to this body, in relationship to this mind. And if we're not quite sure how to kind of look at it, where to look at that from, asking questions is a wonderful way of bringing the spotlight onto the present moment and start investigating it. And just something as simple as, what does the body feel like right now? Where's the mind at? What mood is it in? What state is it in? Because these are, as Lumpur Sumedho likes to remind us very often, the body, the mind are conditions. And conditions change constantly. So what are these two conditions up to right now? And how do they condition our experience? How do we relate to that experience? What do we do when we come to the temple in Chithurst and sit down, do some chanting, and then in this very pleasant space, everything goes quiet, we close our eyes, and what? Fall asleep? Relax? Zone out? Or maybe we feel a bit restless, we're wondering what to do. Or maybe we feel very peaceful and settle with that. But how are we relating to this conscious experience with this body and with this mind? What's happening? Are we just looking for happiness? Like the Dalai Lama said, looking for happiness, trying to avoid suffering? So if we sit down and just watch without trying to do anything, without trying to meditate, without trying to do anapanasati or do the practice, if we just sit and watch, let the conditioning of the mind surface. Let the attitudes and the assumptions and the perceptions that we have around the practice reveal themselves without us trying to do anything, listening to the memories that arise. Noticing the thinking that surfaces in the mind. I've got to develop concentration, I'm too scattered, I'm unenlightened, I need to practice more in order to get something. Or maybe I've got some really good samadhi. Everybody around me is pretty restless and moving around. I'm probably the only one who has it together in here. Whatever the thought is, but it's really interesting not to try to meditate, but really be that watcher. Can we actually notice these thoughts? Can we actually notice the perceptions and allow them to unfold? What happens when we sit down? We come here to meditate. We're in our rooms, in our kutis, on our walking meditation paths, in the kitchen, doing chores in various places. What is the messaging that arises in the mind relating to the practice? What are the feelings that arise? Do we like it? Are we inspired? Or are we uninspired and disgusted? Are we enthusiastic? Or do we feel exhausted and tired and worn out? Do we feel like we know what we're doing? As a layperson, as an anagarika, as a novice, as a junior monk, as a senior monk. It doesn't really matter whether we're a man or a woman, a layperson or ordained. The mind is a conditioned thing. And conditioning just keeps doing what conditioning does. It arises and it ceases. And in a certain way, for all of us, it's really pretty much the same experience. We imagine that Lumpur Sumedho at 58 vasas now doesn't have any suffering anymore, doesn't have the slightest negative emotional state going through his mind. It's only pure light and emptiness and wisdom. Sounds rather nice, doesn't it? But is that really what's going on, or is that just an image we create? What we imagine are the fruits of the practice. What we imagine is going on in his world. And then we create this image and we think, oh, I've got some work to do, don't I? I'm not there yet. And we buckle down and try. But did we notice that all of these are just perceptions that we create in the mind out of things we've read and heard and imagined? So one of the nice things with Lumpur Sumedho, which is actually quite exceptional in terms of the way very experienced teachers express themselves, is that he's very candid and very unpretentious about what goes on. And he talks about his junior years in Wat Papong, where he was so absolutely fed up and frustrated with not understanding the language. Everybody telling him what to do, and him feeling like one of these sort of just helplessly clumsy Westerners who keeps doing everything wrong. Everybody's correcting him all the time. And he just gets so upset and frustrated, and he just goes off to a quiet corner of the forest and he just starts cussing, using every four-letter word he can think of. And you don't think that our enlightened teacher, he did that? But it's something that he expresses, just having these emotions and kind of allowing them to come up to the surface of consciousness without judging them. This is the way he felt. And he brought it up, not for the sake of anything else, but allowing it up into the mind. Feeling anger towards the other monks, towards the monastery, towards the food, towards Ajahn Chah even. Being really angry with Ajahn Chah and blaming him for his misery. And what's interesting about his way of describing this is he didn't believe in any of it, but there was no shame, no judgment in letting these things come to the surface and just allowing them to be what they are in consciousness. It takes a radical kind of honesty with oneself to really allow those things into consciousness and not judge the thoughts and the feelings, the mood. And it's also very inspiring in terms of how it points to this ability not to take things personally. So just out of conditioning, out of habit, that is what we tend to do. We take this body personally. We take our thoughts, our memories personally. So we all have a biography, a CV that we could write out. And that's for public consumption, so to say. And then there's a private, secret biography inside that we don't really want everybody to know, or anybody to know. The one that contains the dark secrets, the shadow, the things we're ashamed of, the things we feel self-conscious about, we feel remorseful about. We take our views and opinions personally. Living in community is a wonderful way of bringing all of that up to the surface, from how to slice the cucumbers in the kitchen, should they be slices or squares or triangles, to how to build a meditation hall like this, or how to mop the floor, how to give a Dhamma talk. Is he doing it the right way? And we have opinions and views about everything, which is natural. It's just what the mind does. It cranks out memories and thoughts. But are we able to notice what these are and realize that the relationship to these thoughts, to these memories, to the moods and emotions we have, to the body, how it feels, young, middle-aged, older, old, 91 years old, whether it's healthy or sickly, good health or disabled, strong or weak, feeling good or feeling unpleasant. Are we able to explore where we're at on that scale between taking things personally and not taking things personally? What is that? And that's really what's at the heart of the Buddha's teaching, is this grasping, this self-view, which the Buddha is pointing at, which is one of the first three fetters that we need to understand and see through in order to realize what he's talking about. So asking questions in the practice is a very good way of exploring Sakyaditi, personality view. And it's very interesting that the Buddha talks about these first three fetters: personality view, Sakyaditi, and the Silabhata Paramasa, which Lumpur very translates very nicely as attachment to conditioning, which really opens that door wide to just about everything, not just the rites and rituals that we may perform in a religious hall like here, which keeps the scope a bit too narrow, but attachment to conditioning and vicikicca, doubt, which arises from thinking, and how those three are really part and parcel of the same thing. They're tied together. If you've been listening to Lompo's talks over the years, you'll notice how much he points out that a sense of self is created through thinking. And the same thinking that makes the bed of all the doubts that arise in the mind. The same thinking that's caught up with conditioning, the habits that we develop in the mind, this body that we identify with. So the Buddha points out these three fetters, and he, in a way, he kind of flips the script on its head. Instead of saying, you've got to catch a glimpse of the Dhamma and get enlightened, and then in our pretty little heads with our thoughts and images, we create this image of what enlightenment or Dhamma may be, and by necessity it's kind of something far away. And then he says, it's only due to our not understanding and seeing through these first three fetters that we don't see the Dhamma. All we need to do is see through these three things. And when we understand them and the power they have to delude us, and we see through that, then naturally we see through that veil, and the Dhamma naturally reveals itself here and now. So it's something that's always here and now, always available to us, that we can see, realize, understand. So asking questions, exploring, investigating, in particular our experience here and now in relationship to those three fetters, it basically brings us back to how we deal with experience that arises in consciousness here and now. We don't have to be in a cave in the Himalayas for 3 years, 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days in order to start delving into this. We're always shackled to these bodies. So anytime we're aware of this body, we can start exploring our relationship to this body. Just investigate it, look at it. Investigate it. Using whatever tools the Buddha gave us for awareness of the body, looking at it from all these different angles. But any which way, asking ourselves, am I taking this body personally? Is this me? Am I attached to it? Do I care about what happens to it? Do I suffer and experience joy? Through this body, and do these experiences of suffering and joy through the body drag me right and left across the map? And if they do, why is that? What's going on? What is this body that I'm attached to? How do I think about this body? How do I speak about this body? How do I relate to this body? And if we just watch and listen to the thoughts, the memories, and the feelings that arise when we kind of pull back a little bit from the picture and be like a bird on the branch, so to speak, not participating in the scene, but watching the scenes unfolding in the garden. And we watch what happens in our relationship to this body. It starts revealing a certain picture. My body, my health, my age, my comfort, my ailments, my aches and pains, my hopes, my fears, my medication, my exercise, my lack of exercise, my lifespan, my food, my drinks, my pills. If you want to learn to understand what's going on, it's really helpful to take a look at that and really allow it to surface in the mind. Dredge it up, so to speak. If it doesn't come up clearly, then ask questions. How do I feel about these things? And take as a measuring stick to give yourself an idea of where you're at in relation to this, how you see your teachers and your fellow practitioners relate to bodies, talk about bodies, relate to bodies and sickness and aging and death. And notice what the difference is between a position that leads to suffering and a position that leads to comfort and ease and freedom and light. What is that? And the difference is always revolving around taking it as me, looking at it all from a point of view of me. I, my body, and this body is like this. The difference between suffering and freedom is this point of view, which we call Sakyaditi, the point of view of self, or Dhamma, the point of view according to nature. That point of view is what makes the whole difference. It's very simple, and yet it's so close to us that sometimes we don't quite get it. I mean, just walk around the room and look at the same room from different points of view. As you move about, you see something different. Coming in through the door, it looks one way. Going up to the senior monks, bowing to the shrine and to the senior monks, it looks one way. Turning around, it changes. Sitting here, it changes. And just this point of view makes such a difference to what is perceived. And then according to what we perceive, we feel a certain way. So if we're perceiving things from a point of view of me, self, what happens? Well, I like it this way, and I don't like it that way. That's how me thinks. I have preferences. I have desires. And we are immersed up to our eyeballs in the second noble truth right there. So using this, exploring what happens, and not to be afraid of that first noble truth. So first noble truth, suffering is to be understood. Second noble truth, the cause of suffering, is to be relinquished. But before we can let it go, and especially before it goes and it stops bothering us, we need to sit down with it and be willing to open up, spend time with it, to understand it. As Lumpur Sumedho once said, if you want to understand letting go, you have to study grasping first. If we want to understand freedom from suffering, well, we have to study for suffering. It's very easy, especially when we use language and expressions such as letting go of suffering. We really like the word go and imagine that that distance between me and suffering is just going to grow fast. So how do I let go of suffering? How do I get rid of this problem? Well, the sad news is we can't. The good news is while we're stuck with it, we can study it really close up as well. So it's a blessing. And that's why the Buddha keeps talking about these four truths as noble truths. Because nobody wants suffering, as the Dalai Lama points out. And we don't really need to ask our neighbors about that. We can ask ourselves if we like suffering, and usually the answer is no. Not a bit, thank you very much. But then if we look at our usual strategies for dealing with it, they don't really work so well. And so what the Buddha's proposing is to change tack. Being willing to explore it, being willing to understand it, being willing to sit down with it. And then start exploring this whole business of taking things personally. Looking at our experiences through sight, sounds, smells, tastes, the experience of experiencing a body through this tactile sensation, whether it's touching things with our hands or just feeling the shoulders, the neck, the lips, the eyebrows, the head, the arms. If this whole body is just absolutely packed with sensory captors that are giving us information, all of that is tactile information, sense of touch. And then exploring the mind, how we experience pleasantness. So I don't know how you feel when you look around this hall, but I find it incredibly pleasant to look at. It's a beautiful design. The colors are soft. The lighting is soft. The people look nice and peaceful. Got these beautiful images. Like everything about this hall is just really pleasant to look at. And then as we look at something like this, we can just allow our usual perceptions and habits to do what they do. So not trying to be enlightened or anything at all. Just look at it and bliss out on how beautiful it is. And then someone turns on the lights, the full lights, neons, and it's a bit stark, and they turn on the sound system a bit too loud, they chant off key and spoil the whole thing. And how do we feel? What happens in the heart? It's like, oh, what a klutz. Can't they be more sensitive than that? And that's what happens coming from conditioning. That's conditioning speaking. And there's nothing wrong with it. And then the next time we come here and we say, okay, I'm going to look at the same thing. Same lights, same Buddha images, same pleasant crowds of monks and nuns and lay people. Same pleasant feeling. Very soothing, silent, beautiful space. In terms of Dhamma, this is sight. And it's pleasant. The Vedana that arises through sight is pleasant Vedana. And the perception is the perception of a whole. You can just gently, without rushing through it or overthinking it, just gently take a stroll through the 5 khandhas, the 5 aggregates. Is this a perception of a Buddhist meditation space? That's the perception that arises. Maybe you have memories associated with that because you've been coming for a long time. Thoughts, there's a bit of a commentary going on. You've got your 4th khandha, mental formations. Maybe even the thought arises, I hope some klutz doesn't turn on the bright lights and start chanting wrong. But just notice it in terms of Dhamma. It's just something arising here and now with these conditions present. And then in terms of sense consciousness, sight, sound, smell, not much going on unless they lit some incense. Taste, probably neutral. And physically, how does the body feel? Just like this right now. And what can I understand about this as it is right now in terms of Dhamma? It's impermanent, it changes. It's pleasant, but it's ultimately unsatisfactory. Just ask the klutz who turns on the lights and sings off key. And it's not self. Or whatever self I perceive in this moment here is a self that I create right now, and that is created out of these conditions here. And when the talk ends this evening and we bow together and we leave, we're on to the next thing, and the conditions here that give rise to this sense of self that we perceive as me being here in the sala, listening to a talk, enjoying or not enjoying it, changes because the conditions change. So whatever self there is just a created self made up of things that are changing in the moment. There's no permanent thing that I can hold on to. There's nothing here that each one of us can grasp hold of, hide in his shirt or in his robes and take it away secretly and sleep with, snuggle up to it tight in bed tonight and it'll still be there tomorrow morning. There's no such thing. And then someone turns the lights on and starts chanting too loud and off key. And how does that feel then, when we've been actually looking at it, contemplating it, investigating it from a sense of Dhamma, from a perspective of Dhamma, rather than from indulging in the habitual me being here in the sala and really, really liking it the way it is and not wanting it to change. And you realize that the difference is that when it changes, we don't suffer. So using things like this, very ordinary experiences of the present moment, and learning to explore them. Sit back and watch what happens just out of habit. And sometimes some Dhamma habits kick in, and they're very pleasant. And sometimes there's perceptions of self that kick in. What happens when the point of view is the point of view of self, of me, wanting to be happy, trying to avoid suffering? And if I get involved with that, the desires to arise to try to hold on to pleasant conditions, when I get involved with the desire to try to get rid of what I don't like, to try to make it change, what happens? So not to be afraid to explore that. Not to be afraid of suffering. Not to be afraid of this beautiful gift the Buddha offered us, this first noble truth. Being willing to open to it and welcome it. And we realize that whichever way we look at it, if suffering has arisen, it's here. And whenever it ceases, that's the end of it. So we might as well find a way of relating to it when it is present, that we can actually learn something from it that is beneficial. It becomes a friend, it teaches us something, it points out to us the places we're holding on, the areas of resistance. It's an absolute dead sure sign to guide us in a practice. When suffering arises, we can inevitably ask ourselves, okay, what have I gone and held of, grasped hold of? And use the second noble truth to guide you there. There are 3 types of desire. Which one is it I fell for? Sense desire, wanting to become something or be something, or try to get rid of something. So these tools are incredibly simple, incredibly direct and clear. They really help us to navigate suffering and delusion and confusion. And every time we learn to use them, we're using thinking, but the questions we ask ourselves in terms of Dhamma, they always point back to the heart. And the answer is in knowing, in the silence, here and now. A commentary can arise to qualify it, or comment on it, or judge it, or whatever, but that knowing, what the Dhamma is pointing to, what investigating our experience and the conditions here and now, Dhamma always brings us back to silence. Sorry, I just have a little question for Ajahn Asoko here, because the nice clock that's next to me says 1:16 and 19 seconds for the last half hour. I have no idea how long how long I should go on here, because the clock is stuck. That would be helpful, actually. Thank you. Okay. Change is apparent. Thank you very much. So in exploring the practice this way, you know how, like years ago, I remember listening to talks by Lumpur Sumedho, like when it's 30 years ago. If you listen to some of his old talks, there's one simile that would come up regularly, is the rat relentlessly chewing his way through a wall and doesn't give up until he gets through to the other side. And that was one of Lumpur's encouragements to us, is just keep at it. And then more recently, I haven't heard him use that image for a while now. And then more recently, I think it's even the title that was given to one of his talks is just keep at it until the penny drops. So there's an interesting kind of blessing in coming across the Dhamma, which is in many ways really a blessing from our own hearts. Is that whatever it is that brought each one of us here in contact with the Dhamma is something that we find in all of us. It's that which is looking for happiness and that which is looking to escape suffering. And according to our paramitas, well, either we run after sense pleasures, or maybe we're blessed with a little bit more wisdom than that, and we look for an answer to that question on the spiritual level. But the question is the same. The question is always active. It never really rests. And talking with various practitioners is interesting, where you realize that you come, this kind of seeking guides us to the Dhamma, guides us to these monasteries where we hear these wonderful teachings. And just that is such a balm on the heart. And we start practicing and we attend a retreat, and then all of a sudden we find ourselves at this point where we start taking the measure of this suffering and the power of our habits and the daunting immensity of the task, and we go, oh my goodness, I was better off before I met the Dhamma. But it's too late. We are bitten. So now we have to deal with it. And there's a relentlessness about this. And we can feel inspired and discouraged. We can feel guided by insights and realizations, and then at other times feel utterly confused and dejected. We can feel enamored with our environment, the monastery, the teacher, our fellow monastics, and other times are just like, who are these guys? What are they up to? We go through kind of all kinds of different states. We attach hopelessly to the things that make us feel absolutely miserable, and in a way we know it, and we keep making the same mistakes, and yet at the same time there's something in us that's asking, what's it going to take for you to let go, to see through this? So that relentlessness, it's almost like it naturally comes out of our heart. And there's something in that we can learn to trust, because it's not self. You can call it whatever you like. You can call it the natural compassion of the heart emerging, looking for an end to suffering. You can call it the natural metta of the heart, wishing for happiness. But it's very nice to learn to trust that it's not self. Of course, we can take these things personally, and we often do, and then we make a mess of it, because that's what happens when we're operating from self. And then when the mess is just untenable, can't hold it anymore, we drop it, and we go, oh. And this is the path of practice. So learning to be willing to make mistakes, willing to suffer, the willingness to explore the present moment really as it is, to really explore the depths of this sense of self, of this wish to control. Explore what it's like to practice from a sense of self, and really kind of look at what that is, me. I am going to get my practice together and make a go for it. The Buddha said we can do it in one lifetime. I'm going to go for it. Enlightenment. It's a very nice thought. But what happens when we grasp that and we start going for it? We make a plan. I'm going to keep precepts and then refine them like nobody's ever done before. And then I'm going to develop samadhi. I'll probably use anapanasati, maybe one of those kasinas. Apparently they're good. They give really good concentration. It's like pick up a couple of psychic powers on the way. Read people's minds. So as I'm kind of shooting like a rocket towards enlightenment, I can kind of enlighten a couple of people on the way, you know? Cool trick. Go up in a blaze. And then basically just, go for it, you know? Become one of the great ones. And then I can relax and just shine. Me. Enlightened. So those are the images we conjure. out of a sense of self. And kind of just the way Lompo Sumedo, when he was a very junior Tan Sumedo, kind of feeling so frustrated and fed up, would just go into a quiet corner of the forest in Wat Pah and let it all surface. Just for the sake of letting it up, letting all these things arise into consciousness, because those are the thoughts of the moment, the mood of the moment. So if you are feeling inspired and enlightened and wise, bring it up. And try the angle of me, and then try the angle of Dhamma. What's the difference between me being bloody wise and getting up on the tamat and giving a really good talk, that inspires everybody, and then they go back to their rooms and they don't sleep because they're buzzing with energy, and the next day they come and they say, "Oh, Ajahn, your talk was really good. Thank you so much." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's me. I'm Ajahn Sumedo's disciple. It finally rubbed off on me. I'm getting somewhere." Or the opposite is like, Ajahn Asoko asked me to give a talk and I don't know what to talk about, and what I'm going to tell these people about my miserable suffering and my hopelessness, and I'm 21 vasas now, and where have I got, and what do I have to share, and it's just all more delusion and hopelessness, and you got to be a Sotapanna to start teaching, and I'm nothing like that. It's just whatever I tell is like the blind leading the blind, and I just hope I get out of here and nobody tells me how crappy it was all. So kind of being willing to explore kind of playfully in a way. If you don't take it personally, you realize there's quite a bit of humor that comes into the picture. But being willing to explore the two extremes, and wherever it is in that picture between I'm the worst wretched practitioner in the whole world to I'm the best. And where is it on the scale that there's a spot where we feel that actually, yeah, I'm probably there. And so as a narcissist, we might be on one end of the scale, and as someone who might come from a very kind of self-negative background, we might be on the other. Or we could just say, no, honestly, I'm not the best. I'm not that arrogant. But honestly, I'm not the worst either. I'm probably somewhere in the middle, average. And watch what the mind does, because we can also go and grasp that and say, yeah, that's me. And you realize it doesn't matter where on the scale you are. If you go and grasp it, then what happens from that position of me being that? I like this image that often comes to mind, as if I just grab hold of something here and I don't let go, I'm not free. The moment Ajahn Asoko rings the bell, I want to move, I can't go anywhere. I can get off and walk around here, but as long as I'm not willing to let go of the back of the seat here, that is my limitation. What I grasped hold of is going to determine how far I can go, and it's not very far. And this is what happens when we grasp identities, when we grasp bodies and feelings and perceptions and memories, stories of our childhood and our past, images of a shiny or desperate future. Whatever it is, if we grasp hold of something, we've just pinned ourselves down and limited our freedom. So, as Lompo said, in order to understand letting go, we have to study grasping. In order to understand freedom, we have to understand what being shackled and tied down and limited is about. It's one of the beauties of this tradition. I don't have experience of any other tradition, but in this tradition we're very constantly pushed right up against our limits and encouraged to go beyond the limits. And what limits are those? They're always the limits of what we perceive ourselves as able to do or not able to do. The body has its limitations, and thinking has its limitations, but the limits that we always keep running into are the ones that we experience because of what we're holding on to. I can or I cannot. I'm able or I'm not able. I can see myself or I can't see myself. Doing, becoming, whatever. And so in this tradition we have this habit of either sitting once a week until midnight, or in Thailand, geographically the closer you are to the mothership in Wat Nong Papong, the more people stay up through the night. And when you go further and further, people get a little bit more relaxed. But either way, you kind of experience these encouragements to just push the envelope a little bit, to go beyond the comfort zone, to go beyond what I think I can do, to endure a little bit more than I think I can take. And the beauty about this is that it's constantly helping to reveal to us what it is we're holding on to, and that will reveal itself as suffering. And every time we stop and look at it, what we find is this me, this identity that we've created around that. In one of the last suttas of the Majjhima Nikaya, there's a short paragraph where the Buddha describes those who have gone beyond training. So in the suttas, that expression, to be one who's gone beyond training, is basically referring to the Arahant, who's completely free. And he's got this beautiful way of describing what someone who's gone beyond training is like. That person can at will see in the beautiful the neutral and the ugly. They can at will see in the neutral the beautiful and the ugly. And they can at will see in the ugly the beautiful and the neutral. So that is a very beautiful pointer that can help us. Because what he's describing is a freedom, complete and total freedom to move between different points of view. Looking at something from one perspective, it looks ugly. But if you change the point of view, it leaves you not thinking much at all, feeling indifferent about it. And if you look at it from a different point of view, it's got value. It's got purpose. It's got usefulness. So it's not about things that we perceive, or even the perceptions themselves. What the point of this practice is developing that freedom to move around from one perception to the other, so that we're not stuck with the perceptions that arise out of conditioning, which are different for each one of us. But what we can measure is that freedom, that ability that we have to move between perceptions. And we can just play with that. Train freedom, train this mobility, train this ability to be completely obsessed with one way of looking at something and seeing only the bad in a situation, in a person, in a character trait of ourselves or others. And then ask ourselves, be it as it is, this is one way of perceiving it, can I move to a different place from which I can look at this and it seems neutral, and from yet another place where I can see the benefits of this? And then develop that ability to move freely And that ability to move freely is the same, exactly the same as that ability we have to recognize every time we've come back out of habit, out of conditioning, to this point of view from which we look at our whole experience here and now in terms of self, which always leads to suffering. And the ability to move to a perception in terms of Dhamma. Take all the personal pronouns out of this one. What is it in terms of nature? In terms of a body, of the mind, in terms of just consciousness, in terms of silence. And when we find that that mobility is limited, then to look at what it is we're holding on to. So I'll leave this reflection at this. I hope it has been useful. And thank you for your patience in listening.